What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. This week we're back with a new tutorial, this time on Reinier Zonneveld. So this guy has a very diverse style, he's covering lots of different genres from trance to acid to other techno or hard techno stuff. He's basically using lots of drum machines, kind of drums, lots of different saw waves, type of leads, acid and all the stuff that we're gonna cover in this video. I've been using his latest release as a reference and especially the track that he made with Angerfist. Be sure to check the link in the description if you want to get the project file for free. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. Thank you for commenting, liking and subscribing, and here we go. Alright, so first with the kick, Reinier Zonneveld uses lots of different kicks, sometimes with reverse bass, side bass, or whatever. But I think a kick that he does the most is really this kick with the toms that kind of creates a groove. So that's what I did here. So I have three kind of layers to show you. So I have my tom layer, my kick layer, and inside I have the punch and the offbeat or rumble. Of course, I have some group processing on the whole thing. So I have this kick tight preset from Ableton, and on the kick group, I also have an overdrive. So I'm gonna keep that to show you the kick, just withdraw that overdrive, and I'm gonna go through the kick punch. So for the kick punch, I have three layers. My main layer is this kick. So this is a Vengeance sample. And on that sample, I'm really just distorting it to create something a bit more hard. So I have two overdrive and I make sure the bass is in mono. I reduce the gain because I don't want to go in the red. I'm adding on that kick punch a top kick. So really something here in the mid-range. This is a top kick that's free from Raveyards sound. Nothing special here, just withdrawing that EQ the high end. And I'm gonna add a tom on top of it. So it's really just to bring the kind of tom texture on that kick, on the punch. So really it adds this little thing in the mid-range, and then it's just the same. I just have one overdrive and I make sure it's a bit narrow with that EQ. And so the whole thing is grouped together, the kick punch. On top of that, I'm gonna add a reverb and a rumble. So for the reverb, I'm just using like a reverb gate or an impact or whatever, and I'm just using the fader here to create the movement that I want. I don't want the lows because I'm gonna have it with the rumble, and again I want something narrow, so I'm just using that type of EQ. And for the rumble here, I'm just using a free rumble sample from TKNVLT. I'm just making sure it's really just the sub frequencies, and I'm withdrawing here that area because it's really resonating, especially after the group processing. So the group processing is really to glue all the things together with that overdrive. And it boosts a bit the whole thing, and then just have some EQs because it was a bit too narrow at first. So that's why I'm keeping this. So this is my kick rumble. And on top of that, I'm gonna add a layer for the tom groove. So at first, I'm gonna just show you this one. So there is one high tom, which is on the offbeat here, and there's a mid tom here that's really just before the kick. So it creates that. And then I'm just adding this one, which is like a mid one also, just to add a bit of more movement. And so in terms of processing those toms, it's all the same, just one overdrive, then an EQ, because I don't want the lows, and side chaining, because I really don't want to mess up the kick punch. And then I'm just adding a delay to create a room and a bit more movement. that I sidechain also. And all of this together is grouped to create that kick. And this kick tight is really boosting the whole thing. Then I'm just a bit of EQ and a limiter to push a bit the kick. And that's it. And then I record this, render it to audio, and this is my kick for the track. So after the kick, I have my drums. I think Reinier Zonneveld really use like very raw drums. So it's usually coming from drum machines, 99s especially. So what I did here is just adding a few drums without so much processing. So what I do is just a little saturation if I need it, some reverb to put in a room, and then just sidechaining. So I have first a little loop here. So as I said, just little distortion, just a slight reverb, ambience reverb, and a sidechain. I have an open hat, so this one is very sharp. Just EQ and same reverb and sidechain. I have another open hat, this one is more strong. It's more like a typical 909 open hat. I have a ride with that typical pattern. So it's the basic 99 ride from Ableton, and then same processing. I then have the clap. So little variation in the pattern here with a slight velocity movement. So it's a 99 from Ableton, same processing, overdrive, EQ, and slight reverb. And that's pretty much it for my drums, actually. And I'm just using them stacking up together in a very progressive way, and also in the breakdown to build the tension. So yeah, that's it for the drums. I'm then gonna show you the leads and all the harmonics. So for the harmonics, I'm gonna add first this very typical lead from Reinier Zonneveld. Basically, it's a saw wave. So I first started with the Hyper Saw Basic. So it's a preset from Serum that you got, the default patches. So it's just two saw waves. I think I've just changed a bit the unison and the detune in order to get what I wanted. I make sure I have the sub here to have something more steady in the lower range, because with that detune, you get lots of variation. And then there's just a bit of EQ and delay. I'm adding a saturation here with the amp, with the rock mode. This really changes the way it feels, actually. So depending on what you want, you can get with the blues or other stuff. I'm also adding a bit of trash with that blues driver. So also quite a lot of saturation coming from this one. And then I don't want it to be too harsh, so that's why I'm cutting that very high end. Also here I add a resonancy. So I have to tame a bit this frequency. Then I have my reverb, quite a heavy one here. My sidechain, and then I'm playing around with the auto filter. And I have also an LFO here that I created for the drop. It's creating that resonancy that moves around. And so to do this, you can just take the part that you want for the automation and you can create some shapes with this mode. And then you can just play around and modify to your liking. So it's a great thing to know. You can create different shapes for your automations. And that's it for the lead. So it's basically really that very strong saw wave. You have lots of unison, lots of harmonics, and this is pretty strong and used a lot by this artist. So I then have lots of different harmonics, especially in the breakdown. So I'm using with that lead A sharp minor or Phrygian, I guess, after I will use it. So here it's the root note and here's the fifth. For the breakdown and the pad, I'm gonna use the root note and the fifths. I'm gonna replicate one octave lower and creating that movement. So for this one, I'm just using, this one is just a sample from Techno. Quite like it a lot, so it's a core. And there's just a bit of hyperdimension, delay, compression, EQ, and there's stutter effect behind it. So I'm using then the same kind of processing, boosting with the amp, just lowering the different resonances, especially here. It could be quite resonating. So here it's just really boosting, cutting, and see what's better to be mixed in the track. So I'm gonna use this pad to build the tension. So it comes slowly at the breakdown and then it's gonna disappear and come back after the drop. And I'm gonna support this one with another pad. So this one is the exact same patch. I'm just using an octave that's above. So you see, just using this as a supporting pad at that point, and it's the same processing. For my breakdown, I'm also creating that ARP that builds also some tension. So I think I'm using the same movement, E sharp, A sharp, C sharp, F sharp. It's just, again, higher in frequency, and I'm using the arpeggiator in 1/8 mode. And it's the same patch, I'm just using it as a pluck, and also choosing a different resonancy here for my filter so that it sounds right. I'm using same processing, so it's a good way to recycle and use your synths in a different way to create different parts of your track. So this time it's a pad. I can also use the saw wave for lead and also for making an ARP or pluck. Here, just make sure it's narrow. It was fitting more to the reference, so that's why I'm using this EQ. And I'm adding also underneath another kind of chord. So it's just to put a layer. And again, I'm just using super saw. So it's again some saw waves, but here it's just more steady compared to the pad with the stutter effect, but it's really just used as a layering to boost a bit the frequencies and have something stronger. And I'm gonna emphasize even more in the breakdown with that Reese Bass that comes after 32 bars. And for this, I'm using one of the patches that I made for my tutorial. And then just moving around with that automation to build the tension. And so all of this together, it creates the breakdown. I make also the drums come back to the drop, and it's also supported by the snare rolls. So to create that snare roll, I'm using two snare, one that's more noisy and one that's more like raw. So I'm creating just that basic pattern that kind of accelerates at the end. I also use this automation with the filter, and I'm also using the return channels to make the reverb sweep at the end. And so all of this together, it creates the breakdown. And then I have my drop, and for the drop, I use just my acid stab. And then I have my drop that's bring back with the lead full on with that LFO. Then after I make all of the other elements come back one after the other to make something very progressive. So just to finish with the acid stab. So here I'm using two notes, the root notes, and I'm using a patch. I think this one is from Raveyards Sound. So it's a classic clean acid stab. So it's created by that resonancy with a filter, and it's a saw wave again. So to keep things very coherent for the track. And I'm just using that stab here and there in the intro, here before the drop, and then after as a background element. I also have this acid bassline. This one is made with ABL3. So this is a sequencer, and it mimics a 303 machine. So I'm playing a 16th pattern with the root notes and the third with some up and down here and there. So with this sequencer, you can play around with the cutoff frequency, the resonancy, the envelope, decay, and so on. It's a very good tool to replicate those 303 sounds. And I'm using the saw waves. I'm just adding a bit of room with the reverb and with some delay and creating a bit more resonancy in the lower mids and bass. And I'm also playing around with the filter to make come that bass line in the breakdown, and then I'm using it after with the drop. So I'm using this acid bass line as an element to bring even more emotion and deepness. I also add this little vocal sweep effect that kind of emphasize the feeling and emotion. So I just have a bit more elements in the background. So I'm using first this effect, which is kind of perk with some harmonics underneath and lots of reverb, and it's actually accompanying the kick. And also with that snare, so just the snare plays here with some reverb and delay. So these are my background elements, and I have also a few sweeps here and there here to kind of anticipate the breakdown. Say, okay, my breakdown is coming. I have the impact at the breakdown. Also at the end. And I have also little impacts, actually a reverse at the drop and a crash. And I'm so using a few return channels to make some reverse sweeps here and here. You can create it directly with the drums, for instance. And that's pretty much it for this track, guys. I hope you like it. Thank you so much for the support, and I see you in the next one. Ciao.